How one spreadsheet exposed a market lie. It began with a file no one paid attention to, a routine spreadsheet passed around without discussion, filled with numbers everyone assumed were already understood. Yet hidden inside those rows was a contradiction so stark it would eventually unravel a belief the market had relied on for years. To understand why this mattered, we need to revisit a period when confidence in market transparency was absolute. Data was everywhere. Reports were automated. Dashboards updated in real time. Investors believed that with enough information, nothing important could stay hidden for long. But abundance has a downside. When everyone sees the same summaries, no one questions what they're summarizing. This story matters now because markets don't collapse from missing data. They collapse from misinterpreted data. The lie at the center of this story wasn't intentional. It was comfortable. It allowed the system to keep functioning without asking inconvenient questions. The first reveal begins with junior analysts tasked with reconciling internal numbers against public disclosures. It was supposed to be mechanical work. Check totals, verify classifications, flag discrepancies if they exceeded acceptable ranges. He wasn't hunting for insight. He was looking for alignment. Instead, he found inconsistency. Totals matched perfectly. Headline figures aligned. But when he broke the spreadsheet apart line by line, patterns emerged that shouldn't have existed. Certain assets behaved differently once aggregated. Risk appeared to vanish at the summary level while intensifying underneath. It wasn't an error in calculation. It was an error in framing. The second reveal came when he reorganized the data using a different grouping logic. Nothing exotic, just a rearrangement that reflected how positions actually behaved instead of how they were labeled. The results shocked him. Exposures a firm believed were diversified collapsed into a single concentrated cluster. What looked like balance was actually repetition. The third reveal arrived when he tested the same approach on historical data. Past stress events suddenly made sense. Losses once attributed to unpredictable markets lined up cleanly with the hidden concentration he had uncovered. The spreadsheet wasn't lying in the traditional sense. It was telling the truth the system didn't want to hear. And that realization marked the moment a routine file became a threat to an entire narrative. The analyst double-checked everything. He assumed he had made a mistake. He rebuilt the spreadsheet from scratch, imported the raw data again, and applied the same alternative grouping. The result didn't change. The concentration remained. The lie persisted. The conflict emerged when he tried to explain what he had found. His supervisor listened politely, then dismissed it as a reporting artifact. "That's not how we look at risk," he said. The statement wasn't a rebuttal, it was a boundary. The framework determined what was allowed to be true, but the analyst couldn't unsee it. The more he explored the data, the clearer the problem became. The firm's reporting structure wasn't designed to reveal real exposure. It was designed to align with regulatory categories and internal conventions that assumed diversification by label rather than by behavior. Assets with different names move the same way under stress, but the spreadsheet treated them as independent. The tension deepened when the analyst applied the same logic to other desks. The pattern repeated. Different strategies, different teams, the same hidden concentration. It wasn't a flaw in one portfolio. It was a systemic illusion shared across the firm. He escalated the findings carefully, framing them as a request for review rather than challenge. Risk managers reviewed the file and focused on the top line. Capital requirements were met. Limits weren't breached. The models were satisfied. From their perspective, there was no problem. The spreadsheet complied with every rule it was designed to meet, but compliance wasn't the same as truth. The analyst tested a simple scenario. He simulated a modest market move, nothing extreme, and applied it to the hidden cluster he had identified. Losses multiplied far beyond expectations, not because of leverage, but because of alignment. Too many positions relied on the same underlying behavior. The firm wasn't diversified. It was duplicated. The conflict sharpened when he shared the simulation results. The reaction was uncomfortable silence, not disbelief, recognition. The data made sense. It explained recent near misses the firm had brushed aside as noise. It revealed why hedges hadn't performed as expected. But acknowledging it would require admitting that years of risk reporting had missed the most important thing. Leadership hesitated. Fixing the issue meant rewriting how risk was measured. It meant challenging regulatory comfort zones. It meant explaining to stakeholders that safety had been overstated. And in large institutions, change is never evaluated only on accuracy. It's evaluated on disruption. The analyst felt the weight of that hesitation. He realized the spreadsheet hadn't exposed a single mistake. It had exposed a choice, whether to preserve a narrative that kept the system comfortable or confront a truth that would force it to change. The choice lingered in the air longer than the analysts expected. Meetings were scheduled, postponed, rescheduled again. Committees asked for refinements, then clarifications, then alternative presentations that softened the implication. Each revision pushed the truth one step further from the surface. Not denied, just delayed. Meanwhile, the analysts kept testing the spreadsheet against new data. Each update reinforced the same conclusion. The hidden concentration wasn't shrinking. It was growing. As markets evolved, strategies that looked different on paper were converging in behavior. The firm's exposure wasn't just mismeasured. It was becoming more fragile by the day. The conflict escalated when a minor market shock hit. Nothing dramatic. A short-lived spike in volatility. Yet the firm's losses exceeded model expectations by a wide margin. Risk managers blamed timing. Execution teams blamed liquidity. But the analysts knew the real reason. The shock had passed directly through the concentrated cluster he'd identified. The spreadsheet had predicted it almost perfectly. That moment shifted the internal conversation. Executives asked harder questions, not about whether the spreadsheet was correct, but about how long the issue had existed. The answers were uncomfortable. Years, possibly longer. The firm hadn't been unlucky. It had been exposed. Pressure mounted to contain the damage. Some proposed adjusting position sizes quietly. Others suggested adding hedges to mask the concentration without acknowledging it. The spreadsheet was now viewed less as insight and more as liability. It told a story the firm wasn't ready to explain. The analysts faced subtle resistance. Access to certain datasets slowed. Requests for deeper analysis were redirected. It wasn't a direct shutdown, but it was a signal. The truth had reached the edge of what the system was willing to absorb. Then the buildup intensified outside the firm. Across the market, similar stress patterns appeared. Other institutions reported unexplained losses during small disturbances. Correlations jumped unexpectedly. Diversification failed in pockets no one could name. What the analysts had uncovered wasn't isolated. It was systemic. He updated the spreadsheet one last time, incorporating cross-firm data and public disclosures. The picture sharpened. The same lie repeated everywhere. Markets weren't diversified the way reports claimed. They were synchronized by shared assumptions, shared models, and shared comfort with surface-level truth. The analysts realized this wasn't just about one firm correcting a blind spot. It was about whether the industry would admit that its most trusted reports were telling the wrong story. The spreadsheet had become a mirror, and the reflection was impossible to ignore. The mirror forced a reckoning. Leadership could no longer treat the spreadsheet as an internal curiosity. Its predictions had proven accurate. Its implications had spread beyond one desk, one firm, one balance sheet. The lie it exposed wasn't malicious, but it was dangerous. And ignoring it now carried more risk than confronting it. The climax arrived during a closed-door session with senior executives, risk leaders, and external advisors. The analyst presented the spreadsheet one final time, unchanged, unsoftened, unprotected. He showed how reported diversification collapsed under behavioral grouping, how safety vanished the moment markets stopped behaving politely, how the firm's confidence rested on labels instead of reality. No one argued. Silence settled, heavy and unmistakable. The numbers spoke for themselves. Years of assumptions unraveled in a single view. What had looked stable was simply untested. What had looked safe was merely familiar. The decision that followed was quiet but profound. The firm began rewriting its risk framework from the ground up. Reporting shifted from category-based exposure to behavior-based exposure. Stress tests were redesigned. Diversification was redefined. It wasn't announced publicly. It wasn't marketed as innovation. It was treated as a correction long overdue. Other institutions noticed, not through statements, but through behavior. Portfolio construction changed. Correlation patterns shifted. Liquidity demands softened in unexpected places. Slowly, carefully, the market began adjusting to a truth it had avoided for years. The spreadsheet didn't go viral. It didn't spark outrage. It did something far more powerful. It changed decisions. The resolution arrived months later, when a market shock hit that would have caused serious damage under the old framework. This time, losses were contained. Exposure behaved as expected. The hidden cluster no longer existed. The lie had been replaced by something less comfortable, but far more resilient. The analyst returned to his routine work, unnoticed by most. His name never appeared in headlines. His spreadsheet was never celebrated. But the impact remained, woven quietly into how risk was understood. Because markets aren't undone by deception alone. They're undone by stories we stop questioning. And sometimes, the most dangerous lie isn't the one we tell others. It's the one our own reports keep telling us. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. How